I got to thinking about the vindictive indictments that are rolling in, and there's reporting that more are on the way, specifically John Bolton. Looks like he is on the verge of being indicted. And as as we sort of collect indictments and look at them as kind of a batch, there are some things that I wanted to unpack a little bit tonight, and that is all vindictive indictments are not created equal. They may all be vindictive. They may all be dismissed ultimately because they are vindictive prosecutions or selective prosecutions in violation of the due process rights of James Comey, of Letitia James, of John Bolton, but they're not all created equal. Certainly, all indictments aren't created equal generally, and the motive behind these indictments, even if the motive is vindictive, you can overcome a claim of vindictive prosecution. We'll talk about how that is in a minute, but let me just take a couple of minutes with each of the three and share my view of what distinguishes one from another. So, first of all, the James Comey indictment, vindictive, right? Donald Trump says the vindictive part out loud early and often. No question that it's a vindictive prosecution. And it also looks like there may be no actual evidence supporting the conclusion that James Comey committed a crime. That's based on the publicly available reporting. It sounds like they are not going to be able to prove, certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt and unanimously, that Comey committed any crime. It doesn't look like they've got the goods on him. Doesn't look like he lied in his congressional testimony. We don't know yet definitively because we haven't seen the evidence. But so the vindictiveness claim is at its zenith if you've been indicted and you haven't committed a crime, or the government doesn't have adequate evidence to prove you committed a crime. So I think Comey may have the strongest vindictive prosecution claim. Then we go to the second indictment, Letitia James. We don't know if she, we don't, I'm hesitant to use the term committed bank fraud. We don't know if she committed bank fraud. We don't know if she misrepresented anything on her loan paperwork. If she didn't, they have no case, and her vindictive prosecution claim will be just as strong as James Comey's. Because if you prosecute somebody who committed no crime, that is like the mother of all vindictive prosecutions, right? Um, but if she did make some misrepresentations on her loan paperwork, again, I'm not suggesting she did. I don't believe a word that insurance lawyer Lindsay Halligan put in these indictments. I won't believe a word of it until I see the evidence introduced in court. But if she did make misrepresentations, saying she's going to use the home she's purchasing as a second residence, when in reality she was going to use it as a rental property all along, there may be a potential crime there. There may be bank fraud, but as we discussed last night, when you look at the numbers, it doesn't really add up to a significant felony bank fraud crime. Because as we discussed last night, the allegations in the indictment are over the life of the loan. I'm going to assume it's a 30-year loan, even though that doesn't appear in the paperwork in the indictment. Then, she was defrauding the bank out of $52.77 a month. That's no kind of bank fraud, right? That's a rounding error. I'm not excusing it if, in fact, there were intentional misrepresentations on loan paperwork, but it's not a federal bank fraud case. It's just no self-respecting prosecutor would bring a case like that. I don't even think a state would bring a case like that. Sometimes what we do when we assess whether to pursue a criminal charge or not is what is the nature of the injury. Injury can be a physical injury in an assault case. It can be a financial injury in a fraud case. It can be a reputational injury. And if there's little to no injury, then sometimes, even if there's been a technical violation of the law, we decline to pursue a criminal charge. Let me use a more common, everyday example. If somebody walks up to a stranger on the street and pushes them, no injury, just pushes them, get out of my way, pushes them. That's a battery, which is a form of assault, an unlawful touching. Would prosecutors bring a criminal charge? No. People push one another a million times a day. And if we're going to bring every, pushing incident to court, we would drown in criminal prosecutions. The same is true in fraud cases. If the amount of injury is so de minimis, so minimal that it's laughable, $52.77 a month she defrauded the bank out of, I suspect they would have a hard time proving criminal intent in any event. But it may be such a de minimis, a minor amount, a minor injury that no self-respecting federal prosecutor would pursue a bank fraud case. Bank fraud carries 30 years in prison for $52.77 a month. Come on. So she will also have a fairly robust vindictive prosecution claim because her claim may be different from James Comey's if she intentionally misrepresented something on her loan paperwork, which she may not have done, because they'll be able to say, listen, prosecutors never bring a case based on something with such de minimis injury, financial injury. So what does that do? It does make the prosecution of Letitia James for that piddly little amount look vindictive or selective. She may have an even stronger selective prosecution claim. And then we get to Bolton. John Bolton. I've never been a fan of John Bolton. To say he's a hawk as opposed to a dove is probably an understatement. It always struck me as, he likes him some war. I don't mean to be unfair, but John Bolton was never my cup of tea. So, but here's the thing. There is some substantial evidence suggesting that John Bolton may have violated the law. And I can point to two separate data points supporting that assertion. One, I'm going to start with two, because the breaking news from CNN is that it looks like even though federal prosecutors at the Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office had previously concluded that they were not going to charge Bolton, which is a different decision or a different position than saying he didn't commit a crime, right? Remember how we just talked about the pushing is a battery, is a crime, but there's no injury or such de minimis injury that prosecutors wouldn't bring a criminal charge. They could say, listen, even if John Bolton disclosed something in the book he published that probably was still classified such that he should not have published it, it may violate one or more federal laws prohibiting the dissemination of classified information. But it's such old classified information, it's no longer damaging to the nation's security or capabilities that there's any harm. May still be a violation of a federal law, the wrongful dissemination of classified information. But because there's no harm, the prosecutors may have concluded, we're talking in a vacuum here because we haven't seen the evidence yet, may have concluded, no, we're not going to prosecute Bolton. Then when Trump says, yes, you are, evidence be damned, de minimis injury be damned, you're prosecuting him. That will still give John Bolton a vindictive prosecution defense. but it may not be nearly as robust or compelling a vindictive prosecution defense as James Comey has or Letitia James has, but it will still be an available defense, particularly because the reporting is federal prosecutors previously decided they were not going to charge him. But here's what I just read in the CNN reporting today, and this is why I wanted to jump on with you all. No, that's only half of the reason. The other reason is I want to jump on with you all to have our community meetings every night. But I thought this was ripe at the moment to be discussed in tonight's community meeting. So here's what I read in the CNN reporting that definitely caught my attention. And I'm going to quote from Bolton's lawyer, Abby Lowell. He said, the multi-page printout here, let me find it. Abby Lowell, a lawyer for Bolton, has maintained that he did nothing inappropriate with classified records and said records with classified markings found in his, Bolton's, possession during the recent searches were decades old. Okay, that's a tell. His lawyer just confirmed, he divulged, because this is the first time I heard about classified records being seized pursuant to the search warrant that was conducted on Bolton's home, and there was one conducted on his office. That search netted classified documents. But his lawyer tried to downplay the injury, right? Downplay the significance of his possession of classified documents by saying, quote, well, they were decades old. Here's the problem, friends. The problem for John Bolton. There is a specific federal statute that covers the unlawful retention of classified materials, even if they're decades old, even if they're so outdated that the disclosure of the information in those old classified documents has no potential to harm our nation, our national security. It still may be a crime if you have unlawfully retained classified materials. Remember how Donald Trump was unlawfully retaining classified documents at Mar-a-Lago in his bathroom and his ballroom, and he was moving them around to hide them as part of an ongoing criminal conspiracy? That's a more dramatic and harmful violation of the federal statute that prohibits the retention of classified materials. Bolton's may not have been nearly as harmful, but he may have violated a federal law. And if an attorney goes on record as outing his client as having classified information, documents, materials that he probably should not have retained, but he offers the explanation, the mitigation, right, reducing the level of harm or culpability by Bolton. They're really old. They don't mean anything, those classified documents that they seized pursuant to a search warrant from Bolton's home. That is a tell loud and clear that his attorney's trying to get in front of the damaging information that is about to be revealed, I suspect, when Bolton is indicted. So that's one data point that suggests not all vindictive prosecutions are created equal. You know, James Comey may not have committed a crime. He has the most, he therefore has the most compelling vindictive prosecution claim. Tish James, if we're talking hypothetically, if she misrepresented anything on a loan document, that may technically violate the law, but there's no real harm, de minimis harm. So she'll have still have a fairly strong vindictive prosecution claim. John Bolton may have violated any number of federal laws by mishandling classified information, but prosecutors previously had concluded that he shouldn't be prosecuted for whatever reason, maybe de minimis harm. So he's got a vindictive prosecution claim, but can you see how it's a sliding scale? How all vindictive prosecutions and all defenses based on vindictive prosecutions are not created equal? Here's the second data point that gives me um, reason to conclude that Bolton may be in some trouble for what he did. Remember how he published a book? You know, I love how these guys, I love how these guys in government would watch Donald Trump engage in all kinds of abuse of office, abuse of power, corruption, flat out crime, and they wouldn't come forward and blow the whistle or reveal or disclose any of it. Instead, they just let him damage American democracy, you know, until they left government and they could write a book and reveal some of it and make a profit off of it. Mike Pence did that. Mike Pence knew that Donald Trump was waging an unlawful pressure campaign against him, Mike Pence, to try to throw the 2020 election, to try to unlawfully refuse to certify Joe Biden's win and corruptly throw the election to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was urging him to violate the law and the Constitution, the law specifically being the Electoral Count Act. Donald Trump was commissioning a crime. He was urging, he was commissioning, requesting a crime be committed by his vice president. And Mike Pence didn't publicly reveal any of it. That's effing shameful. I'm glad Mike Pence stood strong on January 6th and certified Joe Biden's win, even though Donald Trump had launched an attack on the Capitol and on Mike Pence, and he ginned up the anger and the violence of his supporters after he learned Mike Pence refused to delay the count of the electoral votes or, agreed to certify Joe Biden's win. What did he say? He sent a missive out to his troops that were attacking the Capitol. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. In other words, criminally, corruptly, unconstitutionally install me, Donald Trump, in the presidency for a second term. What was the message? Get him. Get him. And chants erupted on the Capitol grounds. Hang Mike Pence. And Mike Pence didn't reveal Donald Trump's attempt to commission that crime until after he left government service, wrote a book, and profited from it. We expect better of our public servants, whether you're Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. I got sidetracked there. So Bolton, remember, wrote a book. I think it was The Room Where It Happened, because he's Mr. Big Shot. And in that book, he potentially included some classified information that he shouldn't have. Now, you may remember the way that played out. I think I did a live about it, but it was probably a month or two ago. And very briefly, because I don't want to keep you too long on a Saturday night, and I need to get to my lentil soup. An exciting Saturday night, isn't it? I think I'm officially old if I'm looking forward to Saturday night lentil soup. I'm really getting off track here. So Bolton, let's get back on track. Bolton had this book that he'd written, and now follow the bouncing ball here. He submitted it for review, which you have to do. You submit it to DOJ or to some federal official who is charged with reviewing books to make sure there's nothing classified, nothing inappropriate that would be disseminated publicly when you publish the book. Somebody from the National Archives was, I think, detailed over to the NSC and reviewed Bolton's manuscript and cleared it. Said it's all good. Nothing in there. They went through several revisions, nothing in there that shouldn't be in there. But then apparently the White House, Trump's White House, this was during the first term, hijacked the review process. This was the reporting. And because they didn't want Bolton publishing this book, at least that is the reasonable inference we can draw. And they said, no, 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 there's a lot of stuff in there that can't be published. And they made some representations to a judge, Judge Lambert, who was presiding over a suit that had been filed by the government trying to put a stop to Bolton's book being published. And here is the open question. We don't know if the lawyers who were involved in that litigation for the government, for the executive branch, DOJ, were straight with the judge or not. There's a suggestion they may have reclassified things that had been declassified previously just to try to jam Bolton up. We don't know if that's how it played out, but there is at least some evidence to support that conclusion. Not surprisingly, the Trump administration would play games to try to hurt one of Donald Trump's enemies, John Bolton. Shocking, right? And Judge Lambert, who is a personal favorite of mine, we've talked about him before, said, listen, this book has already gone to the press. The presses, it's been printed. And if it gets, I am not going to issue a restraining order prohibiting it from being sold. But if it proves to be that there's classified information that is being unlawfully disseminated, well, John Bolton will then run the risk of getting in trouble for it. I'm paraphrasing. I think I read it last time we talked about this issue. I read what Judge Lambert said specifically, and Asha Rangappa wrote a great article about it that she posted on Substack, and she and I went on live together. I think you may recall, and we talked about it. You can still find that video on YouTube if you're interested in looking it up. So there are some data points here that John Bolton may have committed federal offenses involving the mishandling and the unlawful retention of classified materials. So I'm not shocked that the Trump administration is changing course. The Biden administration apparently looked at this, federal prosecutors, and said, no, either he didn't commit a crime, or if he did, it's de minimis injury, or there's some impediment to us proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. So they opted not to charge Bolton. But then Trump came, galloping back in to office, jackass that he is, and wants everybody vindictively prosecuted. So it looks like he may actually have a crime that he can charge John Bolton with. The evidence may actually support it. We don't yet know, but I will say there seems to be more evidence supporting a Bolton indictment than supporting a Letitia James or a James Comey indictment. But let me finish with this. It doesn't mean Bolton won't have a vindictive prosecution claim, because if the prior prosecutors looked at it and said, we don't have it, or maybe we do have it, but it's a de minimis injury, it's so minor that classified information doesn't mean shit to a tree. That's what we say in DC when it's unimportant. That doesn't mean shit to a tree. They declined to bring charges, and Trump's DOJ has reconsidered that decision, and it looks like they're going to bring charges. So, but he'll still have a vindictive prosecution claim, if only because the prior administration said, no, we will not charge him. But it may not be a winning claim. May not be a winning claim. Here is what I will leave you with. John Bolton wouldn't be the first high government official or former high government official who's been prosecuted for mishandling classified information. Remember General Petraeus? General Petraeus wrote a book, and he had a long, distinguished career of public service as an Army general, as the director of the CIA, head of the CIA. And then when he left government, he had to write a book. I think it's called All In, I think. And the problem was his editor was also his paramour, girlfriend, and he ended up sharing information with her that was still classified. So he wrongfully disseminated or mishandled classified information, and he was prosecuted. Now, I shouldn't say nobody, that one didn't appear to be a political prosecution. It's just that he stepped on it. He mishandled classified information, and there was a criminal investigation. He pleaded guilty. to, I believe, a misdemeanor charge or a couple of misdemeanor charges, and he was put on probation. But still, he's got a conviction, criminal conviction, federal conviction for mishandling classified information. And I don't believe that was the product of politics. I think that was the product of appropriate law enforcement. But it looks like Bolton, the reporting is, could be indicted as early as, Monday or early this coming week. All right, everybody. I'm going to enjoy. Yeah, yes, thank you, Skippy. Skippy says, "Go enjoy your lentil soup." You trying to get rid of me, Skippy? No. All right. Thank you, everybody. It's great being on with you on a Saturday night. Thank you for sharing part of your Saturday night with me. Tomorrow night, Q&A, community meeting Q&A. Let's do it. I'll post in the morning a request that you send me your questions, and then we'll roll through those questions tomorrow night. I'll try to take some time away from Sunday football. We'll knock out about an hour or so of the Q&A. All right. Have a great rest of your Saturday night. Have a wonderful Sunday, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.